talking about the effects of screen time, the effects that it has on our brain, and just in our lives in general. 1 billion years. That's the amount of time people have spent staring at screens in 2018 alone. It's enough time to fill the lives of 12.7 million people. The world is quickly becoming a place of sensory overload, and the people living in it have become desensitized to the happiness found in a face-to-face conversation or the simplicity of a peaceful moment. Could it be that the digital world has saturated the human brain with such a high dose of immediate gratification that people are now dissatisfied with real life? The digital age is just over 3 decades young, and it was spawned from the hope of creating a world with universal interconnectivity and a business environment capable of reaching greater productivity. This thought of a worldwide network sounded like a dream, but it wasn't until the 60s and 70s that this mind-boggling concept became more of a reality due to technological advancements. Computers quickly became a standard household appliance in no more than a decade, and the World Wide Web was publicly released in 1991. The internet and its advancements became the defining technological achievement of the last few generations. However, the initial excitement and introduction of a new digital frontier may have clouded some of the screen time addiction issues lurking within an otherwise bright future of screen-based communications. By now, there's little visual space left that hasn't been filled with some sort of advertisement for the next newest thing. However, speaking to the balance of supply and demand, it could be safe to say the nation and the globe are tilting toward the demand side of things. People just want more. One more app, one more game, one more episode, just one more minute. In fact, it could be safe to say that it's an extremely difficult task for tech companies to keep up with the ever-growing appetite of this world. Now, we're going to look back at that 1 billion years statistic I shared with you just a moment ago. This number means the global average of screen viewing is about 6 hours a day for each of the 4 billion people who have internet access. Now, the scariest part of this statistic is not just the sheer amount of time spent, but the fact that not every part of the world is deeply saturated into the digital landscape, like countries like the US and the UK. Here's a graph representing the percentage of each country's population that has access to the internet. North America and Europe seem to be the most technologically invested, while regions in Africa and Asia seem to be the least developed in this area. Currently, the internet has only been adopted by about 50% of those living in the continent of Asia, as compared to 95% of North America. Despite the higher percentage in North America, Asia vastly outnumbers the amount of users due to its massive population. Following the trend of 9 hours a day spent on screens in the US, global screen time numbers will be drastically different when the populated continents of Asia and Africa reach a similar user percentage. To put things in perspective, if 95% of Asia and Africa had access to the internet and smartphones, the total user number would rise to about 7 billion, and the amount of time staring at screens would almost double. And it's realistic to assume these numbers will dramatically increase, as powerful companies like Google, Facebook, Alibaba, and Tencent strive to deliver scalable global products that address the needs and context of these new users. According to a 2018 study, adults in the United States spend about 11 hours a day using some type of screen, whether that be a television, a smartphone, or a computer. This number is 2.5 hours greater than it was only 4 years prior to the study. And it grows at a faster and faster rate as time goes by. The trend carries over to young ones as well, with countless stories of children being glued to their electronic device. The US Department of Health and Human Services estimates that American children spend about 7 hours a day in front of electronic media. It's building a generation of kids who are focus challenged exponentially more than previous generations. There's a kind of retraining of young minds to process what we see as excessive screen time as being the new normal. It doesn't help that 88% of teens in the US, ages 13 to 17, have access to a smartphone, the all-encompassing entertainment system. The reason the smartphone is such a leading culprit in this digital epidemic is due to its portability, immediate accessibility. Gratification comes easy for someone who feels the need to constantly check their phone when they get bored. And though boredom may not generally be regarded as a good thing, in her article regarding the benefits of boredom, Maggie Panuska states, researchers have found that passive, so-called boring activities, such as reading or attending meetings at work, can lead to more creativity. That's because being bored can promote daydreaming, which allows us to make new, innovative connections. There is a war over people's attentions, and it's bigger than ever. With all that is put in front of our faces, it's hard to naturally come across a boring moment. And by that, I mean when the brain isn't processing some kind of new information. The smartphone craze of this decade not only has affected the egos and confidence of millions in America, but it's shaping the minds of upcoming generations. The extreme doses of screen time are detrimental to one's mental health, especially a young person. According to a 2017 study, teenagers are more depressed, feel hopeless, and are more likely to consider suicide. The research gathered revealed teens who spend 5 or more hours a day on their device are 71% more likely to have at least one risk factor for suicide. These statistics become quite disturbing when they're combined with data from another report involving about 2,600 young people. The report says, the average American teenagers spend an astounding 9 hours a day with digital technology. Now, one may argue that these 9 hours shouldn't be taken too seriously, since some of that time is likely used for productive purposes. But, according to psychologist Jean Twenge, whether teens are watching cat videos or looking at something more serious, for example, doing your homework, the amount of screen time, not the specific content, goes hand in hand with the higher instances of depression. In the state of California, about 30 million people have access to the internet. That's about 80% of the state's population. About 71.4% of Californians have smartphones. And an issue surrounding smartphones and screens that's often unheard of or ignored relates to their tangible effects on the human brain. You remember that saying I brought up earlier that goes something like, one more app, one more game, one more episode. Well, as it turns out, dopamine, a chemical often associated with highly addictive activities like smoking and drinking, is released during internet use in video games. Research and brain scans reveal these activities give its user a sense of accomplishment, just as rewarding, if not more, than the use of cocaine. As the internet is being used more and more, it has also been discovered that significant functions in the frontal lobe of the brain are affected as well, such as planning, prioritizing, organizing, and impulse control. And if you find yourself struggling with falling asleep at night, this issue can also be linked to the use of your smartphone. Studies show that the chemical melatonin is affected when we view our phones. This is the same chemical that helps us fall asleep at night. Not only will it be more difficult to fall asleep, but it will prevent deep sleep and likely cause at least one symptom of depression. In a local survey reaching 50 teens and young adults from the Yuba Sutter area, 63% of smartphone users admitted to spending from 5 to 10 hours on their phones alone. It is revealing that about the same percentage believe excessive phone usage leads to depression. Yuba City native Dallas McBride shares how he has seen the effects of screens in his experience teaching, pastoring, and being a father. When asked about social change within the youth at church and school, Dallas noticed people are less comfortable with talking to each other and confrontation, and things that should be done face-to-face are often handled on screens, like breakups or arguments. Dallas makes the point of how difficult it is for many junior high and high school students to resolve conflicts and interact because they're so used to having, quote, no pressure of waiting for a response from the person they're talking to. Dallas also spoke of the mental and spiritual battles teens face against temptation on the internet. He said, there's a lot of temptation on the internet. Even if you're not purposefully trying to find pornography, there's millions of ads and images everywhere that can attract someone. Dallas related these issues to Ephesians 5:15 through 16, which says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." The current state of the secular world is practically driven by social media and the internet. The issues surrounding screen time have gained small amounts of mainstream attention, but ultimately, the world has harnessed media to push and influence others. People are subliminally encouraged to keep in touch with current trends, news stories, and trivial conflicts within the private lives of celebrities. This constant outpour of unproductive information and media only encourages the youth to invest more time into shaping their outward appearance on social media and become more self-centered. This ego-driven lifestyle can make it difficult for one to truly care about their friends and the interests of others besides themselves. At first thought, it might seem like the digital craving of screens has nothing to do with the Bible at all. Sure, Jesus didn't have the means to share his gospel through an Instagram post, but the idea of lifting worldly desires above God's glory has been documented in early books of the Bible. A prime example of idolatry in Scripture is the story of the golden calf found in Exodus 32. Breaking it down to its simplest terms, anything that is put first place over God is idolatry. Whether it be the golden calf then or the smartphone now, and it's undeniable to say that screens are a modern-day golden calf. Not only do they eat away at our time, but they open up doorways to temptation, pride, depression, and many other issues that will keep one distracted from God. If you are convicted of the time you devote to your electronic device and you have a relationship with Christ, I would recommend meditating on the question of, do I have the mindset God wants me to have? The Bible is clear. God should be the number one priority in our life. Luke 10:27 says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, your strength, and all your mind." It wouldn't make sense for someone who spends 10 hours a day on electronic media to say they love God with all of their heart, soul, and mind. Colossians 3:2-3 reads, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God." So, if you're struggling with phone addiction or screen addiction in general, there are 5 simple steps that can be taken toward recovery, recommended by life coach Tara Payne. Start the first 30 minutes of your day without looking at your device. Create dedicated times to stay off of your device. Turn your device completely off when you're in the car. Devote your attention to real people when you're with them. And finally, power off your device at least an hour before bed. Now, these steps may come across as a bit overwhelming, sure, but the benefits of implementing them would be worth the effort. Being able to experience real life without being addicted to screens is something that millions of young children are going to miss out on if screen time trends continue. We must work together to bring this issue into the light of the public eye in order to shift a portion of this upcoming socially inept generation into a group of balanced, mentally healthy leaders. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Okay, so we are going to open it up to the judges first to ask their questions, and if there is any time after, we'll open it up to students and our other guests.
Good morning, Luke.
Good morning.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, I see these resolutions, these solutions, and they're individual for individual people, students, but this is a world problem. So what do we do about the world problem? I mean, we can self-regulate ourselves, but government control, what do you say about the world?
Well, we can do what we're able to do here, honestly. We can try to make a worldwide impact, but that's a very hard task to do, obviously. But I believe that any movement starts in a small place and expands. So,
What would an expansion look like?
what would the expansion look like? Well, by word of mouth. Ironically, by word from texting. but I think that these effects are applicable for anyone who faces addiction to screens. I believe that through my research, the common thing that has been, the quote-unquote cure has just been a hard fast, or just limiting yourself from screens. It's very simple, but it's pretty difficult for many people.
And just one more about the government. I've been looking on at the news, and they're saying now, like a particular kind of music, if it's offensive, then they take it off the device so it can't be heard. And let's see. And then also particular companies can't, campaigns, things like this, that get on there and they say they shouldn't be on there. Is it truth? Is it fake news? What do you say about those things?
So you're talking about like the limitation
Do you control government? Who controls? Should there be?
Who controls what's on screens?
Right? And who should?
Well, there actually have been talks about some laws limiting copyrighted material from the government, but I believe that's just for creators and individuals who want to create original content and don't want it stolen. Pretty much anyone can post anything, and you can be influenced by anyone from anywhere. So I'm kind of confused on what you're asking a little bit.
Just simply if the government should have more input, if the government says everything is too much out there, like you've been saying, maybe the government should have more input.
Well, I think it's important for us to obviously have, the freedom to say whatever we want or share whatever we want online. So I would not be for like suppressing material that's posted, but it just has to do with the individual, I think. It just has to do with what you're willing to expose yourself to online.
Luke, speaking to the issue of government regulation, there's actually talk of, in California, banning smartphone use in schools because of the things that you mentioned, distraction in class and things like that. Do you think that that is something that the government should do, is pass a law that would ban smartphone use in schools? And because some people are concerned that that would violate our rights to communicate, freedom of expression. That's the argument some people are giving. Do you see that as a violation of your amendment rights?
I honestly don't, but I don't think that they should outright ban having phones on school property. I think they should do a similar system to what we have here at Faith, where you put your phone in a holder on the wall or something of that nature. But I don't think they should outright ban it because there's always emergencies that can come up. So, but it is an issue being distracted in class, for sure. So just to find the balance of invading privacy and, I would say the easy medium would be to put it in a holder on the wall during class period, during work time.
Luke, great job.
Thank you.
I was wondering, I know that what I've heard is that the World Wide Web and beginning all this started in the military. Did you find any of that in your research?
Yeah, I found that the beginnings. I know that it was in the 50s. when there was like the first computer modem or something like that, and it was for military to be able to connect with each other and things like that. But that was just my background information research.
Any truth to the fact that Al Gore is the never mind.
So if you're saying, oh, sorry, by the way, excellent job. So you're saying that really the solution comes down to the individual deciding to self-regulate, right? So my question is then, how do we make sure that this information and this concern gets spread to the various communities that are impacted locally, nationally, worldwide? How do we make sure that the organizations that benefit from this epidemic do not overshadow the truth? And how do we get that out there so we can get individuals to be aware, educated, and then make those responsible decisions?
Well, I don't think this is an issue that can be just resolved in the snap of a finger. This will take, gradual years of, spreading the word, and especially from like a small group like us, it's kind of unrealistic to assume that we're going to affect the whole entire world. But I believe that it can spread, like I said, by word of mouth or by text. And I also believe that the responsibility lies with the parents too of their children. I believe that. I think that more research is going to release that parents need to limit the time that their children spend on iPads, because it's a serious issue. And it's the balance of, it'll give parents time to, de-stress and, okay, I can go do what I want while my child, is entertained by this device. But it gets to the point where it's more excessive, and I think that in the next, generation, and when we're parents, I think we need to be really mindful of how much children are exposed to the outside, because really anything they can run into anything on the internet, especially if you don't have any blocks on whatever they're using. So I think the responsibility lies within parents, and also just word of mouth.
What a great segue to our next presenter. So in the interest of time, we're going to not take any more questions. Let's give Luke another round of applause. We're going to take about 5 minutes right now, let the